he's silent there.
And you're live.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here at February's Wellington Product Tank. And thanks to everyone online tuning in and everyone who ends up watching the recording afterwards on YouTube. We are thrilled to have Vidya here. For those of you who were lucky enough to attend the conference before Christmas, you will have heard an amazing presentation from Vidya. I don't want to call favorites, but I really liked it. And we're really lucky to have her all the way from California. Not only does she spend most of her time coaching teams around the world on how to make excellent product teams and products, she's an author of a book, a host of a podcast, and luckily likes to call Wellington home every now and then. So she's here for a little while, and we're making the most of it. And when are you coming back after you leave?
I'm going to be here for another month.
Another month?
And then maybe back before you know it.
Okay, excellent, great. So yes, so I'll hand over to Vidya. She'll introduce herself probably a little bit further and give you a rundown of the groundwork for product teams. Thanks.
Thank you, Chelsea. That was so lovely. It's just so nice to have such a warm welcome, and it's lovely to see everybody. Does everyone have a seat? Do you guys want to sit? You good? You just like on a perch? It's a long time. Okay, I'll let you be. I'm just really excited to be here. Who was at Product Aotearoa? A few people. Oh wow, that's so cool. I'm not going to talk about the same thing again. Don't worry. I'm going to talk about something completely different. This is really nice to be home talking to product teams. Every time I do this, I just get goosebumps. So hi to everyone out there as well. I want to talk to you about product-led mindset. And this has been a subject of conversation for ages, right? I mean, this is what we're all talking about. What does it mean? I want to give you 5 examples of companies that are exemplifying different types of product-led mindset. I'm going to give you a little bit of a structure of sort of here's what they do, here's the pitfalls, and here's how they've overcome them. And I'm happy to take questions at any time. It's going to feel like a bit of a role, and I'm happy to hang out and chat to you. And what I do need to do, I'll do this in a second, is up my parking. Don't you love a product? Don't you just love a product that just says, have you moved? And you go, yeah. And you haven't. It's fantastic. Don't tell them that. None of you work for pay my park, whatever it's called, right? No? Okay, don't make them change that feature. It's really useful. Okay, all right, here we go. Here we go. So you know, whether you like Bezos or not, and I'm going to use Amazon as an example a little bit later, you know, what he has really instilled in his organization is this idea of being customer obsessed. And they do this all the time. They talk about this. We're going to talk about one of their artifacts and how they've used it to become customer obsessed. And so this idea, we start with what the customer needs and we work backwards, is a really compelling notion. And it's one that we actually use for a lot of teams to help with a vision. Because a vision feels like this really big, scary thing. And using this artifact, I'll just ask you, who uses a PRFAQ? Anyone? Okay, Chelsea, one person. I'm going to introduce an artifact and a framework that I think you can use tomorrow, and it's incredibly effective for setting a vision. And what it does is it speaks to your customer before you even talk to one. And it's interesting, it's somewhat controversial, but it's really interesting. But this is what I love about it. It's so customer obsessed. This is what it means to be product led. So some of you have seen this slide before. This time you get to play. So you can bring out your phones, because the 500 people that we asked about the struggle across B2B, B2C, and the data I'm going to show you is still the same. It's still for mid to large size companies. But this time I want to hear what you think. Of the people who are working as product managers now, think about the last 30 days. Those of you who are sort of temporarily in between gigs, think about the last job that you had and just put yourself back there and think about the pain. And what I'd like you to do, and hopefully this will actually come up, excellent, is grab that, either the QR code, if you can see it, or you can go to slido.com and punch those numbers in. And let's see what's in the room. We'll just give it a second for people to get in there. and I can see how many people are like, so we'll just wait for like a handful of people. Excellent, we've got one person, cool. Oh, I finally got warm in here. Chelsea, I hear you on the AC. Oh, got steamy. It's been freezing all day and now it's decided to get warm. Okay, I'm going to just give it 1 more minute. 8 people, let's get to double digits. Interesting. Okay, so what we're hearing sort of overwhelmingly in this room is it's debates. You're sitting there and arguing with people about what's real and what people believe. We see this all the time, especially when you're arguing with leadership. Or they might have talked to a customer, or they've heard of someone, or they've seen something in the news, and suddenly that's the thing that you're supposed to build. Finding it hard to prioritize, 64%. Okay, so we've got 25 people, which is a nice chunk of people. You can see that the data that I'm going to show you next, it correlates quite significantly to this. It's interesting that, can I push this down a bit? Oh, shoot. No, I'm not going to do it. It's interesting that find it hard to prioritize is about 60, and the debates is higher. That's the first time I've seen that actually, and I wonder, we should talk later culturally about what that actually means, because I find that really fascinating. But here's what the data says. The find it hard to prioritize is usually number 1, and then you've got about 50% here. Like we came out with 80 and about 25, 27 people. When we talk to 500 people, the opinion-based debates goes to about 60. But what you should take away from this is that you're not alone, right? We tend to maybe talk about one pain or we gripe, but this is hundreds and hundreds of product managers all over the world are having this problem. This is what we need to overcome. Because what happens is, this idea of producing outcomes is not there because we're working really hard, we're arguing, we're finding it hard to prioritize, our backlogs are crazy, and how do we make the shift to product-led? So Chelsea told you that I just give you a tiny bit of an intro. I don't normally do this in talks, but I feel like I'll do it now. I've been in product for a really long time, like Tokes and I, 25, 30 years. Where's Tokes?
Bring me into it.
Bring you into it. Like we share sort of similar histories. I met my business partner Heather when we were into it, and I spent over 10 years there. When I left, I was leading a team of about 100 people, and I had the end-to-end experience for TurboTax, which is a leading tax software in the US. About 10 years ago, we started Product Rebels. We wrote a book, and for a lucky person in here, I do have a book to give away. So nice. That could be the winning answer. I was going to save it for a question, but if it's really crappy questions, people, then that's the bar you have to overcome. And then, as Chelsea said, if you like hearing about stories about getting to product-led, we talk to product leaders on Product Rebels on our podcast. It's a little different. It's not a how-to. It's actually talking about leading. And it's talking about what it takes to change mindset, culture, practices to become product-led. So anyway, that's us. Here's a bunch of logos. And it's just to show you that some of the examples I'm drawing upon, we have worked at scale from early stage all the way up to Fortune 50. There are multiple instances that we have trained and coached 400, 500 product managers in the same company all over the world. So when I talk to you, it's based on sort of this depth of 10 years of coaching. So I'm not just making this up. Okay. I'm going to talk about 5 things in the journey to best in class, and I will never, ever do a build in this room ever again. Okay. I want to talk to you about 5 pitfalls and the journey to product-centric. And the way I want to do this is to give you an example of a company, and I want to talk to you about what they did. So we'll talk about output to outcome. We'll talk about vanity metrics and how to change those. A lot of product managers get stuck and this is the metric that I'm supposed to publish or the board wants, but how do you move that to customer-centric? Moving from dev, being told what to build, to thinking about how do you provide the right context. I want to give you an example of what it looks like. This idea of limited learning to continuous experimentation, which is what we all want. And then this idea that instead of the technology and dependencies driving product decisions, you're really taking an end-to-end view. Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's do the first one. Clearly, we want to avoid this idea of going around in circles, doing a whole bunch of work, and absolutely getting nowhere. So let's talk about Amazon. And I promised you I'd start with the PR FAQ. So again, Amazon, whether you like them or not, are extremely customer focused, to the point that Bezos says customer obsessed. We have taught PR FAQ over the last 3 years because we think it's so effective. So let me tell you what that looks like. A PR FAQ is a press release with an FAQ. What you do is you write a press release before you ever start. That is your vision document. Your press release is written exactly like an AP press release. It's got a newswire, it's got the date, and then what you do is you pretend your product is there. You pretend you're launching it. This is you as a reporter writing about this. So you put yourself in the shoes of a year from now, 2 years from now, and it's the vision. It's not the first release. It's not your V1. It is your fully realized product vision. And you're writing it as if it exists. So let's look at some of the features. It's got metrics built into it. You're understanding the customer problem and you're addressing it. Here, it says 23% of online shoppers report having their packages stolen. This was huge back in 2019. 19% complain of grocery deliveries being spoiled. So you get your groceries, they come at the wrong time, it's wrecked. Amazon wanted to launch a sort of a frozen delivery service that kept your food fresh, all your packages fresh, or safe. They locked it up and you had to have codes and stuff to get to it so that people wouldn't steal them. So take a look at some of the features that they have actually launched. Nothing has been done yet, nothing's been built, there hasn't been a single line of code, nor has there been a single user story. There's not even a PID at this point. This is all made up. But what it gives you is a document that you can circulate with everybody, with your leadership, with your team, and that everyone knows what it is that you're building, why you're building, and who you're building it for. If you take a look at some of these, I'm going to lean in here to read it. This includes a camera and a speaker. Melinda, they do love calling their products weird things. Melinda sends you a text. She sends you a video of the courier. It's got a built-in fingerprint reader. You can start to see that your tech team is starting to think about, these are all the features that I need to have technology for. Your marketing team is thinking about, how do we position this? Your product team is thinking about, what do we do to build this? This is a really powerful way of getting shared vision. It doesn't take you that long to do a V1. In fact, we give people 30 minutes to write a press release, and then you get feedback. So you don't sit there and obsess about it. You don't make it perfect. You don't wait for weeks to get every line. Honestly, please don't use AI for this. Do yourself, because there's something really sort of meaningful. And for us as product managers, this is the core. We're understanding what the market, what the customer, what the business needs, and we're saying this is what we envision, and then you start getting people to read it. The way that Amazon does it is they have a table read. Once they've got a locked-in version, so product manager, you write this, you get a bunch of feedback, you get in a room, everyone sits and reads it together. The FAQ is done from a technology point of view, so you think about all the questions that your tech team, your architects, your engineering might ask. You put yourself in your customer shoes, you do an FAQ for your customer support, and you can do an FAQ for whatever other stakeholder is really important. But the whole document is about 6 pages. It's called a 6-pager. You'll also hear it referred to as that. That 6-pager, you should be able to sit down and read. The press release, you should be able to read in about 5 minutes. The FAQs, you should be able to scan. And then, only after you sit down and read it in silence, does everybody get to talk about it. Interested? Would someone want to try this? Yeah? It's really powerful. Yeah.
So can you just retouch on the FAQ? So the FAQ covers what technology would be.
Yeah. So for example, one of the FAQs, I might think, what will my engineer want to know about the camera? I am going to say, what specs camera would you want? And I'm going to like say, this is what I'm not thinking about. Yeah. Okay.
So this is not cast in stone, is it? It's just
This is what?
not cast in stone, so it could
No,
change. Okay.
Exactly. So there's many revs. So after the table read, you get a bunch of feedback. You go back. And that's a beautiful question. So you may actually end up getting this wrong. You're 2 for 2 right now. Once you've got this, every product decision, like your technology trade-offs, if someone wants to change it, you go back to this and you go, this is what we agreed on, right? Now you've got something that you are not arguing about. Like your number one, 80-some% of you said you're arguing about product decisions. This is what you point to because you've got alignment first, and then you have to have a really strong argument to remove it. This is what Amazon does, and it's really effective. As I said, we've introduced this to dozens of teams over the last 3 years. Okay, that was number one. I've got to go faster. Okay, I'm just going to, Chelsea told me I'm half an hour. You want to go?
No, no stress.
Okay, I'll talk fast, I promise.
You don't need to.
So, summarizing this, you're thinking about measurable definition of success. You saw metrics built into that vision. That's really important. You've got to align on what it is that you're solving for. When you do your initiatives, you're tied to business outcomes. What do they want to do? We actually put revenue goals into our press releases so that you can see this is going to generate X in revenue. So now your product decisions are, am I going to actually gain that? And if it's not, then it's a no.
So,
you're going to slow me down.
You talk about revenue and that. I mean, is this just kind of a thumbs up, kind of blue sky thinking, or is it kind of some analysis that's done up front to make it more realistic, or?
So you're balancing enough analysis to be realistic. So you're not throwing a dart against the wall, but you're also not spending 2 weeks in market analysis. Okay. So you're balancing those, and every business is a little different. For early stage, we're like, you're making it up.
Yeah.
For a really established company, I'll give you PayPal. You know, we would say spend a week, but otherwise someone's going to tear it apart in the room because your press release doesn't reflect reality. So you need to understand your culture.
It's not balance.
Yeah, exactly. And then every priority decision, you're bringing you don't need to be the person arguing. You're bringing your PRFAQ. They've got to argue with the CEO because the CEO just signed off on that vision. So it makes a huge difference. Next one. Vanity metrics, customer-centric metrics. Now, by vanity metrics, I mean things like, this is going to sound controversial, but I'm like LTV, you know, revenue. I mean, these are like big metrics that, you know, for a product manager, they're kind of meaningless. And I'll give you an example. Let me go into Etsy. I was talking to Adi about Etsy just before. Everyone know what Etsy is? Yeah? So creatives, right? What Etsy wanted to do, this is a true story, a senior product manager told us the story. They wanted to increase revenue and customer satisfaction. Who doesn't? Right? It's like, no, I want to reduce revenue. Doesn't happen. So that's the revenue goals that the team had. When you have goals like this, anything makes sense. So what do? They said, what we want to do is increase the number of shops, because the more shops that come on board, that's going to equal more revenue, right? Easy. That's what we're going to do. So they updated their entire website, and they started to do all of this work to make it easy for a new shop to come on board. They spent a bunch of marketing, a whole bunch of new shops came. Well, guess what happened? A whole bunch of new shops came, and then they didn't know what to do, and they dropped out, and there's a huge amount of churn, and you had a whole bunch of really unhappy customers. So vanity metrics. Instead, they said, let's do some research. What do shops really want? What do merchants want? Merchants want to make money. That's why they went on Etsy. It's not just to go, look at the beautiful thing I made. It's like, buy it, right? So they changed their metric to say it's every new shop that has one sale, minimum of one sale. Because once you've got one sale, like, you've got traction. Right? So how do we get to that very first sale? That's the metric. Now, as a product manager, you're going to think about things completely differently, right? So now you're not just trying to get people. It's easy to throw money at places. I mean, I know sometimes we don't have big marketing budgets, but honestly, if you just have a big marketing budget, you can get customers to come. How do you get that merchant to be successful? So they started looking at all the successful merchants. They looked at what they were like, the quality of them, like how they were perceived. And what they found was that success for the first sale depends on things like this. Do you have pictures? How do you describe the product? Is there a promotion? All of these things are best practices. What do? They completely change their onboarding to not just get them on, but to successfully get them to that very first sale. That worked. So that's what I mean by customer-centric metrics. What we like to do is think about Net Promoter. I still like that. I'm still sort of old-fashioned that way. I think it gets so much value. It's not about the number. It's really about like what a customer's saying. That will help you. You've got to do all of this way before launch because you've got to instrument them. You've got to understand what it is that you're trying to do. You probably don't have all the data that you need to collect. You just figure this out at launch. This has got to be part of when you do that vision. You've got to start thinking about what is my customer-centric metrics and how do I instrument and collect and act upon them. And then it's like, how do you have cross-functional accountability? Because there's multiple teams associated with this. And so they needed to bring in a number of teams to make this worthwhile. Okay, that was story number 2. I went faster. Okay, Deb told what to build versus the context of who and why. I want to talk about my company that I was at for 10 plus years. So was Heather, by the way, that's where we met. We both spent a really long time learning sort of customer-driven product management there. Intuit is sort of known for its customer centricity. There's a program there called Follow Me Home. Anyone familiar? Yeah, nice. So Follow Me Home sounds super creepy. It's exactly what it sounds like. You follow people home. And the Follow Me Home program, we all did it. So I'll tell you a really quick story. So I work in tax. We wanted to, at that time, I'm dating myself, this is like a long time ago, but the government was going to introduce free e-filing, which was a huge threat to us, right? Because there we were getting people to pay for filing, so they were going to give it away. So we wanted to understand who was eligible, because they said anyone who's got simple taxes. So we started to figure out who thought they had simple taxes. So I still remember this woman. I talked to her, she's like, this was sort of the rub. Her taxes are really, really simple, but she was collecting a whole bunch of information. So we were like, what is going to make her stick with us or switch? So we went to her apartment. She had told me she was really organized. She told me she kept every receipt and she was like completely goal focused. So what comes to mind, right? If I told you someone who does their taxes, is super organized, is really like just has, you know, the way she talks about it, like what do you conjure up, right? In my mind, there was a filing cabinet, you know, there was color tabs, there was everything was kind of coded. That's what I thought of. So we go into her apartment, we sit down, and she goes to her kitchen. I'm not making this up. She goes to her kitchen, she opens the drawer underneath her sink, and she pulls out a shoebox. And it's kind of stained, and it's kind of damp. And she proudly hands it over, and you're like, this is it. She had stuck every receipt that she ever got into that shoebox. Because that, to her mind, was that she was super organized, she was super on top of it, she knew where every receipt was. I would never have guessed that if I hadn't followed her home. The way she talked about it, I had a completely different image of her. So we're back to being able to go into people's homes, and we would do a whole bunch of Follow Me Homes virtually. You don't have to. You can do this in person now. What that led to, just so that you know, was a new product. This new product called Snap Tax. And what we did was we allowed someone to take a picture of every single receipt they had, and we automatically categorized it. None of her receipts made any difference. None of them. She rented, she didn't have kids. There's all of these things in the US tax system that gives you deductions. She had none of them, but she had a shoebox of receipts she wanted to do something with. We gave her something to do with them. So that's what you can come up with, right? So that's the story. Follow Me Home, super powerful. And one of the things that I think is so important is that you bring developers with you. When I went into that apartment, I brought the lead architect of this, because I was like, you're coming with me. And now suddenly he had this completely different appreciation for the customer. he knew what we wanted to do. He was one of the core team that actually started this new product. We peeled them off and they created this new product. So what do you think about when you're trying to understand the why? You want to start with understand the problem truly in their words and who it is. Just because you think you know is not sufficient. You need to bring your dev team with you so it's not done off in the corner. You don't give them the results. You don't tell them in a meeting. You don't show them pictures. You bring them, they follow them home as well. And then you make sure that everyone has access to the information. There's so many times I've seen product managers do a whole bunch of really amazing research, and then it's sort of shelved or it's buried in some, you know, horrible Microsoft folder. It's like, no, you've got to make this super easy to access every single time. Okay, number 4, we're getting there. Learning. Like going from limited learning, and a lot of the time I think we're in agile and safe, and talking to Tokes and talking to Anthony up in Auckland, I understand there's a lot of development, there's a lot of sort of agile safe development here, which sometimes limits you to learning with these ceremonies and the when you can do it and how you do it and the period you can do it in, and how do you move to this idea of continuous research. So that product managers aren't overwhelmed. You're not just sitting there with overwhelming backlogs going, I've got 2 hours once a month to do some research. It's like, that's just not sufficient. For that, I'm going to talk about Netflix. So Netflix is, everyone knows Netflix. Netflix started continuous experimentation, I think before any of us did it really well. They did it on steroids. In fact, 35% of their content right now is self-developed. 35%. The reason they can do that is they've got so much data, they experiment so much, that they know exactly what we want to watch. When we have exhausted a genre of our favorite theme and we're looking for it, when your number hits a certain target, they're like, we're going to make that show because we've got 2 million people. And they can do this so narrowly because you're constantly experimenting and learning. They've got algorithms for personalization. They measure everything. A good friend of mine is Gib Biddle, who is the former VP of Netflix. He actually was there when they started this experimentation like crazy. And what I loved about this is they went from a very customer research focus, which was always really, really good, but they combined it with this like really intense data focus. And this is about sort of 6, 7, 8 years ago. And with that, their hypotheses got better, their insights got better, and their target was always delighting customers. And now they give all the results to the production team who would go make the shows. It's just an incredible way to think. So, continuous mindset. Think about learning velocity. Measure that in the same way that you measure dev velocity. Like dev velocity is like everyone can sort of rattle it off immediately. But how many of you can rattle off your learning velocity? We want you to learn at least once a week. I'd like you to learn every single day, but measure it. Kagan talks a lot about dual track in terms of discovery. No, that's a 30-minute talk all in of itself. We can talk about that offline. And then this idea of transparent, collaborative, closed-loop learning is what I mean by that. Every time you learn something, if you don't share it with your team, it doesn't mean anything. So figure out how you're constantly sharing that. Last one. Okay, this idea of tech dependencies driving decisions, with this idea of decisions taking a much broader end-to-end view. I'm going to talk about a client. It's Sharp Healthcare. They are the biggest healthcare provider in Southern California. They're my healthcare provider in San Diego. They're amazing. They're very focused on customer experience. When we started working with Sharp, what they found was their product decisions were constantly overturned, much like what you just talked about in the data. And because they only met with their key stakeholders once a quarter, they would do all of this work and then would get all overturned, and they would do all of this work and get overturned, and it was just miserable. So what we ended up doing with Sharp was, this is another maybe controversial. People have either love product advisory or they hate it. I'm on the side of I love them. I think you're bringing your key stakeholders together, having accountability for this end-to-end view, so that not one person is trumping the other. I can't even believe I used that word. Like, take a deep breath, everybody. You don't have to go back there. But the idea of like bringing the right stakeholders together, this end-to-end accountability isn't something a product manager can do by themselves. So what operating mechanisms can you use? For us and with Sharp, we brought together the key stakeholders, the business leaders together once a month. And so they started to own the decisions and the trade-offs. And in doing that, they started to go away from these little fiefdoms and there's like these technologies or these dependencies. It took a while, believe me, this isn't happening overnight, but we saw a sea change in about a year of bringing together once a month, them seeing the same data, the same research, and trying to drive these decisions. So in terms of thinking end to end, this idea that you want to collaborate early, you want to make sure that you get, whether it's a product advisory or however you do it, you just need alignment. And what you need to do is to bring your key functions in. And if you need your CEO to help with that, just go to the top. Don't butt your head against a wall. Okay, so I would love one last little exercise for us. Put these in order for me in terms of like what you think in your organization is the most important. You should have a little kind of code come up and you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you change your mind, you unclick it and it just moves. So I'll just give you a minute and then we'll look at the results. It should be exactly the same poll. Maybe it'll still be open for you. But I don't want to show the results just yet, otherwise it might. Are you not getting it?
No, it's just Q&A.
Oh, really? All right, let's do that then. Is it active now?
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe Slido did that. That's silly. Let's see where we end up. I know this takes a few more seconds, but I promise I'm nearly at the end, Chelsea.
There's no rush. You've got time. We'll do Q&A after this. No.
Oh, interesting. We've got a tie for 1. Okay, now we've got a tie for 2. Oh, wow. Providing the right context. Interesting. Customer-centric. Output. Okay. It is hard. It's like, this is where I think it's really interesting to see where people are focused. And it's really, there's not much in it. There really isn't that. This is so cool. Thank you for doing this. This is really sort of data for me to learn, but could someone who put output to outcome, like one person who made that first? Anybody? Yeah, tell me why.
Well, we want results at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's our job.
Yeah, nice.
I don't know.
That totally makes sense. You're like the results oriented. What about someone who did end-to-end view? Anyone put that as number 1? Yeah.
I think this answer ties back into some of the challenges we identified earlier. If in this room, a lot of people are facing problems of like opinions versus outcomes or something, right? A lot of times it's stakeholders that's kind of like they have hunches, they have whatever visions that they have, and they're kind of like getting us to do different things to combat that.
Yeah.
The top 3 will help you get there. So the first is to get them to think about things in terms of outcome.
Love it.
So they may have this genius idea. If it doesn't work, at the end of the day, it doesn't work. And I guess, sorry, and I'm just like, you were asking end-to-end view. That was what I voted. Turns out it was like number 5. I think that would help that as well.
Yeah.
So that they don't like work in silos. This higher up that's in charge of this area, I think whatever they're in charge of is the most important thing. They need to all work together so that they don't, they can battle it out on their level so that, they're accountable for that. So I think that's why the end-to-end view is quite important.
Cool.
Maybe
No, that's really,
experimentation too.
yeah, no, it's all, they're all important. I get it, they're all important. No, but I thank you for sharing that, because that whole silo and getting people to work together is so important. So I'm going to leave you with this slide. Actually, I've got a couple more, but I want you to just ask yourself these questions. This is where you start. And I'd love for you to ask these questions, because this is kind of gives you a direction to begin. The reason we did that poll is that all of them are important. The other thing we all know is trying to do everything at once is impossible. And especially changing culture is really, really hard. Changing culture when you're not aligned, when you're not the CEO, is even harder. So from our position, where do you start? So I would ask you to ask yourself, can you articulate the outcome? Because if you can't, start there to your point. It's about results. If you don't know how those outcomes are measured, or you don't have control, you have an instrument of that, but you kind of know the outcome, but you don't know how they're measured, start there. If you don't have a clear documentation that's shared with your problem persona, you can download our templates, because we can help with that. If you don't know how to test within days, if you can't figure out how to get to a customer and test within, like, well, I ask you to do a test tomorrow, you should start there. If you're not sharing the customer learnings, this is low-hanging fruit, gang. Just share it. It's super easy. And then this idea of, your product decisions incorporating your key stakeholders. You don't have to do it. Really, Google just really is persistent. If you're, if you don't have, don't you love this? If your product decisions, if you don't have a product advisory, think about it. Think about how you could bring a key group together. It doesn't have to be everybody, it could just be 2 or 3, or just start with one. How do you begin? So this is where I'd ask you to think about, because this is truly a journey. It's an overused term, but it's going to take us time. I have to just tell you a little bit about Groundwork, because this is the work that we do with teams, as I said, all over the world. And we focus on these 3 pillars and these 3 practices. So the problem statement is a really simple way of articulating the problem you're solving. It's the first way you get to alignment around the outcome. Actionable persona is because it's all about being able to do something with your persona versus just print it and have it on the wall. Individualized needs is a way to connect, especially for those of you in multi-segments. What we find is that you can have a list of problems and a list of personas, and people munge them up, and then you solve for nobody. So you got to align them, and then you got to prioritize. And it may not be the obvious one first. So there's a way to do that. Developing hypotheses, we should all think about hypotheses. We shouldn't be doing any testing without having a clear hypothesis. There's a really simple way to do this. Scrappy research, this is testing within days and hours. And then getting commitment is alignment. So this is our program that we work with. But you can get all of these templates. If you didn't get them in Product Aotearoa, you can get them online. You can download them, they're free. I would encourage you to use them. That's how you can access me, and I'm here till the end of March, so you'll get a faster response. And I want to thank you, Chelsea, and thank you everybody. I'm happy to answer questions.
Very right. How does the PR FAQ approach, where you spell out this is what we want to make, gel with don't tell the developers what to do?
Well, you said in the vision, you're not saying how. What I said in the vision of Melinda was, I need a camera. I didn't tell them like what kind of camera, where it was, how it was supposed to be. Like I didn't give you any specs. I just said I want an ability to do that, right? So they can interpret that and they go, oh, they understand what I'm trying to do, and then it's their job to come up with the technology. So I'm telling them who I'm serving and why I'm doing it. I'm giving them a high-level view of the vision for what it looks like, the benefits. I'm not telling them anywhere how to do it. That's the difference.
I was intrigued by the learning velocity. What's the metric that you're tracking there?
How much research you do, how many people you talk to within a week. So you take a sprint, if you've got a 2-week sprint, if you do a sprint of sprints, however you do, measure development velocity, use the same time frame and measure how many times you're talking to people, and that should go up. Like a lot of people test once a sprint. Like how do you get to testing twice a sprint, then 5 times a sprint? How do you, the goal is to be testing continuously.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
So how your press release and the technical constraints or time constraints that come from some choices you've made in your vision, how you marry this
Together?
Yeah, you iterate.
So I'm setting a vision for 2-3 years in the future.
Right.
I am not dictating what V1 looks like. So that's not a roadmap. This is pre-product roadmap. This is setting where we want to go, what the customer benefits are, and now you're starting to break it down and go, how do we get there first? What does V1, 2, 3, 4 in the roadmap look like? So that's when your technical restraints. So to the camera question, they may be like, we can't get to a camera until V3, but what we can do is we can prototype X, Y, and Z. So you're testing the prototyping, but you're not releasing a V1 with a camera. That's just an example of how you could do it. Yeah.
What are some of the ways that you mentioned transparent and collaborative closed loop learnings? What are some of the ways that you've seen it work really well and that you get other people really engaged on that learning journey?
So this sounds sort of trite and funny, but the very first way we do it, we always do like lunch and learns, and like we buy pizza, and then people are like, well, I'll get some lunch and I'll come and watch your customer learnings. So you bribe them, is number one, right? Then you get them hooked. You start by like any means necessary, whatever works. I mean, if it's a happy hour and you're serving wine, do that. I mean, just get them to listen to it, but then they start to see what you're doing with it. They get to see what product decisions are being driven on it, and then you can stop bribing. Then it's really about sort of central information, accessible. Are you putting in Slack every time you talk to a customer? Are you sharing it? Are you texting people insights? Like, how do you like not make it a ceremony to share, but part of your DNA that you learn something cool and then you tell everybody? Thank you. Yeah.
How many customers do you think like we should talk to get a real feedback? It should be like 10, 20, 30, 40.
So if you've got a really good hypothesis, 5 to 7. And the data proves that out. The design council did all of this research, this is now 10 plus years ago. And what it looks like is if you have clarity and you're laser focused on what you want to learn, you will get directional information within 5 to 7. And that is really for qualitative, right? You can test a whole bunch qualitatively. When you're going to market, I would recommend a quant study, and then you're sizing the market. So understand what you're trying to do, but 5 to 7 for a clear hypothesis is enough. In fact, about 4 or 5, you're like, I've got what I need.
One more question
Yeah.
I have is like when you told like you have to tell your team like build camera. So maybe they'll come up with GoPro, I need a big camera to shoot a film. So like how would you define that? Like how I can express more? Because like right now also I'm building a product.
Okay.
So I gave it to my dev team. I said like this is the product I'm building.
Yep.
But and later on I need some API, which is third-party APIs, which I need to integrate into my product.
Yep.
Now the technology they have built, it's very different from the API feed which I'm getting.
But did you tell them that they needed to be integrated with those APIs?
No, I give them a full freedom. I thought like they'll come up with new technology.
But you need to tell them what you need to do. Like if you're like, I've got to be in market, these are my competitors, I need to be able to integrate with X, Y. Then you're not telling them how to integrate, but you're saying, I need to work with X, Y, and Z. So you need to tell them, as a product, you need to give them the guardrails, but what you don't want to do is within those guardrails, tell them how to go about it. Does that make sense? Otherwise, yeah, they don't understand what it is that your vision is. So, you know, it might be that you're targeting a certain country and they have certain regulations. If they don't know that, they're not going to build towards it. But if I tell them, especially like I worked on an insurance product, and when I came in as a product leader, the regulation team was outside of product. And they, after the product was built, they'd come in and they go, well, you can't do it in Florida that way. You can't do it in Texas that way. And it was crazy because we spent all this time developing. So what I ended up doing was embedding them into the product team and said, no, right from the word go, you're accountable for this working in every state that we go into business with. So you need to figure out how you bring in the business constraints into your technology team.
Do you give the same advice to UI team also? Like you ask them, like if suppose the product is ready, front end part, the UI part, like do you give your inputs or you let the UI guys design by themselves?
I mean, I think this idea of like letting them do whatever they want is like we're a team, and you've got business. I mean, you're the business owner, so you've got business constraints. You're not going to tell them how to design it. I mean, I'm not going to be the UI expert. But they can't design something that's not going to work for my customer, and I'm the customer expert.
Are there other stages though where you might be less directive, like the camera example of OCRing receipts or something?
Yeah.
Like that's maybe an obvious high-level solution that you've given them to flesh out.
Yeah.
But there could have been a time before that where you had a group of people and said, well, the problem is people aren't putting their receipts into the product.
Yeah.
How can we solve that?
Yes.
And it's a more open-ended.
It is a much more open-ended.
Is it different stages that you go through?
I love that question because there's this idea of we discovered this insight. Like when we came into that person, we were like, holy moly, she's got all these receipts that she thinks mean something, and she's going to be keying every one of these in, and what a nightmare. So you could do that with messaging. You could be like, you know, right from the word go, don't do this, right? So marketing, you could do this with technology. You could do this in multiple different ways. That to me is sort of innovation discovery sprint, which is very different from I've got a PR FAQ and now I want you to do this via camera. Yeah, great question.
Can you share more about Scrappy? What was it? Scrappy experimenting, Scrappy research. Yeah.
So Scrappy research. The way we like to think about it is that you can learn within hours. So we go through a set of techniques for how do you get there. So the first step is that you've got to understand your customer, your persona really clearly, and then you need access to them. So whether you're B2B or B2C, you still need access. Some B2B, the very extreme, you can't ever talk to your customer because you're never going to get to the CFO, for example. How do you have a set of proxies that are sitting there as stand-in? So you can still learn within hours. Then we teach you how to do a hypothesis. So you have a really clear hypothesis and you have a learning plan, which gives you a set for the 5 to 7, how to learn within 5 to 7. That's Scrappy research. Now, it sounds, we always say Scrappy and go, that's a lot of steps, but once you have these things set up, it's really fast to get the testing done.
So are they in the same room with the
Not necessarily. Sometimes it can be async even. Sometimes it's interview, sometimes it's follow me homes. It depends on what it is that you want to learn. But you have a group. We've done groups that you can go to Starbucks. If it's a B2C, you've got an app that you're showing a prototype. Like send me, Adi just left, but his is basically he could go to any sort of like he could go to the Wellington Fair. Like, do they exist still? Like, you know, do you have like do you still have like, you know, vendors and
farmers
markets? Yeah, farmers market. He could go to a farmers market and he could test that within hours of a farmers market. He just goes around saying, do you want to sell this online? See if you can put this on. All the way to you might have a really formal customer board that you have to meet formally because they're senior executives.
With that Scrappy research work in a scenario, so I lead a technical team.
Yep.
It sits right at the back end or back app. So we don't see the front end customer. We don't engage. We provide the security layer. That scrap issue sounds like I'm now thinking for my team because we've got to do a lot of learning as we're developing. But we're feeding to the ultimate product. But so we won't have a persona.
You do. You have an internal persona and an external one. So you are serving a developer. Is that right?
Really,
Who's your customer? Who's your buyer?
that's also a difficult question because it's the entire bank.
But someone in the bank must.
Yeah,
The
the thing is,
CTO.
yeah, but usually security goes across the entire bank. So when I'm doing security for a customer, it's whether it's mobile app, whether it's internet banking, whether it's
But this is their CSO, security officer.
Yeah.
That someone is ultimately your buyer. Then there's people who influence the decision, right? So you've just got a more complex situation. Anytime you're B2B2C, you have to understand the multiple Bs, and you also have to answer your end consumer. There's nothing more powerful than you telling the bank what their customers are asking for. That will change the game because you've gone and done the research. A lot of technical teams of B2B stop at understanding and providing APIs or whatever, but they don't really understand what they're doing this for. It honestly changes the game if you do both those researches. It's just longer and harder, but you just picked a harder problem to solve. Any questions? Okay, back to you, Chelsea.
Sure. No more questions? Are we sure? Cool. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody. If you want to rewatch this or look at any of the slides, it'll be on YouTube. You can always catch it there on the Mind the Product Tank channel. And thank you so much for being here. We look forward to having you back next time you're in the country and you can all hear Vidya speak again. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.